Well, if you look at dreams, for instance, which is where all kinds of things kind of bubble up to the surface, you'll see some kind of indication of this. And Imam Ghazali, when he talks about dreams, says that they're of different kinds. That there are some dreams which are, he basically identifies three types. There's the dream which is the recycling of memories of things that have happened to one recently or in the distant past. That the consciousness is just sort of turning it over and over again for reasons of its own and may break surface, and he says they have no spiritual significance. Second category is, he says, demonic inspirations, really kind of dark, ugly things that certain human beings can focus on, that obsessive, addictive behavior and interest in dark and dirty, impure things that sometimes can happen when we sleep, when inhibitions are lowered, sometimes even to people when they're awake. If they're not people who have sufficient self-discipline, they can find that they really are kind of fixed on the ugly. And there's a lot of modern art, for instance, tends to exploit that, our desire to see what's ugly, the intestine, the nudity of an ugly old person, or the kind of thing that the modern artist is preoccupied with. Is for Imam al-Ghazali an example of these khawatir shaytaniyah, the demonic impulsions. There's no rational reason or spiritual reason why we should want to look at somebody's dirt, but the modern artist is interested and wants us to be interested as well. And the third is the angelic inspiration, which is the ilham, which comes from a higher realm, which everybody kind of intuits in a weak way when they experience beauty. That the experience of seeing the sea or a beautiful painting or something inspires some higher possibility within them, but they usually don't have the ability to conceptualize that. But in its pure and intense form, it's the experience of the believer when they are confronted with the reality as a result of a lifetime of service to others and prayer and genuine, sincere activation of the religion. And that person may expect to receive a genuine ilham. It can sometimes happen that people can be given an intuition or an unveiling without apparently having done anything to deserve it. And this frequently seems to happen. And though in many Muslim cultures, and no doubt in Malay culture, there are similar stories of people who seem to have led a bad life, but Allah gives them something inexplicably, and they become sort of people whose dua is always answered. There's a story of a well-known saint in Delhi 400 years ago in India, and he was known that if you went to him and asked for his dua, the prayer would always be answered, and people would go from all around India to ask for his dua, even though he was this wild man who just lived on the street, and his company would only be with the children on the street, and he would play with them, and he would ride sort of toy horses with them, and that was his life. And the Sultan Aurangzeb wanted to ask this saint how he'd achieved this extraordinary degree. And the saint said, "I'm not interested in visiting the Sultan," and he refused all of the invitations. So eventually the Sultan lowered a net from the palace window and grabbed this saint as he was walking beneath and playing with the children, and grabbed him up and brought him in front of the throne. And he said, "I just have one question for you. How is it that you came to Allah?" And he said, "The same way I came to you." In other words, a net was lowered and I was pulled up. I don't know how it happened, but it happened. And that kind of ilham through Allah's generosity can be given to people. They can repent. And I know somebody in England who told me an extraordinary story about how when he was only 14 years old, living as a non-Muslim in a part of England far from me, had a dream of a beautiful man who wore a green turban, had a smiling face, and when this teenager woke up, he felt that there was still some kind of interesting fragrance in the room. And he read and he read, and he realized that it was Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he became Muslim, and he's now Hafiz of Quran, even though he's a convert to Islam. How that happened in his dream, this is part of the alam al-arwah, the secret world of the spirit consciousness, strange things that happen to people in sleeping or half-waking states, and Allahu a'lam as to how that works. But in Allah's generosity, anybody, even the likes of us, can hope one day to be pulled with Allah's net out of our dunya and given something better, inshallah.